Hello everybody and welcome to the Venus Project Seminar for May 20th, 2012.
And most people are not really hurt by the world. They're hurt by their own expectations. I read somewhere that H.G. Wells was very disappointed in people. He felt we would have arrived at more of a scientific community than what we have today. But what hurt him was not the world, it was his expectations. He expected people to lean more toward science and less toward metaphysics. And he suspected that the system would gather intelligence and know the right direction. So what really hurt him was his own expectations. The real answer to that question is whatever happens in the world is real. What you think should happen is not real. So you're not disappointed by the world, you're disappointed by your own projections. If you meet a person, you say, that's a wonderful person, and they turn out to be different than you suspected, you get mad and you say, she isn't that wonderful, or he isn't that wonderful, and it's your own projections that you're mad at. The right way to look at a person is, I don't know enough about them to make a judgment. And in time, when you make a judgment, you say, up to now, they appear to be so-so. But something may come back that reminds them of something else. So they hurt you. They really don't hurt you. They're normal. That is normal to their values. Like my mother would believe in religion because it's normal to her background. And when things get tough, she prays, rather than, because she doesn't know what else to do. What you have to do is take time out and try to inform people as to how to look at things. It may take you 2 or 3 years to do that, but we would expect to find people that understand what we say. When they shake their head, I guess, that doesn't mean they understand. It means they understand a limited amount. So the point is, what are your expectations? Now in chemistry, if you mix certain things together, certain things happen at a certain temperature. At different temperatures, the same thing doesn't happen. You can get mad and throw the experiment on the floor if you don't follow the rules. So if a person wants to be more analytical, they have to learn how to say, I don't know, or up to now, everything seems to be okay. My relationship seems to work out in many different areas, or more areas than I expected. Sometimes we're pleasantly surprised by the reaction of people we had a negative view of. I may have a negative view of you, but in time, observing what you do, my negative view becomes a positive view. But if I have a negative view, it means I was projecting. I really don't know. So the point is, when events occur that are tough, if a person deserts you at that time, you understand that they can't live under those conditions. They're not bad people, they revert back to their conditioning. Now, reverting back to their conditioning means if the world is catastrophic, if a man is shot and he's laying in the battlefield, he says, I hope the first aid people come soon. I don't feel very good. If they don't come soon, he says, where the hell are they? He expected them to come sooner, but they come as soon as they can come, whatever that is. And if you can't take it, you can swear all you want to. But if you continue to swear and continue to get angry, they're apt to arrive during that period. And you say, well, it's my prayers, because I hoped they would come and rescue me. That goes for H.G. Wells had a scene in the movie, I think it was called The Shape of Things to Come, in which a pilot shot down a German pilot or another pilot. And he went over to the plane crash, and the guy was very ill. He couldn't leave. He says, the plane is going to explode and I'm badly damaged. So this guy gave him a gun to shoot himself. In the motion picture Airmail, there was a guy caught in an airplane. He couldn't get out. It was burning. So the guy shot him twice. Guy loved him, but he didn't want him to burn to death. Is that murder? What is it? If anybody claimed he was suffering so much from cancer, I shot him. Is that love? How do you talk about love? Do you know what I mean? If a person is suffering from cancer, he says, please, take my life. The doctor says, I can live 3 months with this condition. And you hear him crying out, suffering, and you shoot him. Are you a murderer? Are you kind? All those words are very difficult to deal with. It depends on the situation, depends on how attached you are to the person. If you don't give a damn about their suffering, you know what I mean? So when people begged certain doctors to take their lives, they were suffering too much. It was too much on their family. They didn't have a bank account to pay for this medical condition that they were under. And they said, please end my life because the pain is unbearable. And the Bible says you're not supposed to take a life, no matter what the pain is. That's your entry into heaven, especially in India. A person is suffering a great deal, they're paying off their karma. If you end that, you shoot them, they can't pay off their karma. So, well, you got all these crazy things that you are exposed to, and you use your logic thinking that it makes sense. It only makes sense if a person says, I see your point, but I'm unable to accept it emotionally. There are people like that can't do that. They can't shoot their father, even though he's suffering, because it says thou shalt not kill. And they figured even if they shot their father that was suffering, they've committed a crime against God. So remember, it's your own expectations that hurt you, not the world you live in. Whatever happens in the world is real. What you think should happen is unreal. So people are hurt by their expectations. If you have reasonable expectations, such as I don't know, and whatever happens, you say, gee, I didn't think it would be that bad. How do you know how bad it would be? Whatever happens, no matter how bad it is, if 50 kids are killed in a bus crash, that's the problem. Why were they killed? The bus slipped off an icy highway. What can you do about it? I don't know. And the condition will prevail. Unless you come up with a new way of friction tires that can't skid on icy highways. That's the best you can do. But if you made those tires and you put them on the bus, and the bus still slipped, it means you got more to go. You can't say, I made icy tires, it won't slip. That's a projection, unless you tested it out many times. Do you understand? So what does man really want? He really wants accurate predictability. You cannot achieve that unless you're technical. Accurate predictability. If an engine fails, it means there's something wrong with a fuel pump or any number of things. If you can't attend to those things, then the probability is that at some time or other the engine will fail. Now, I don't expect you to walk around accepting everything that happens. I expect you to be angered and say, what can I do about it? I don't know, but I'm going to try. I'm going to try to make it possible for people not to be injured. I'm going to try to design a conveyor that's on the tracks and under the tracks that's locked. So even in an amusement park, the loop can't go off the tracks because it's got underbraces. But the underbraces may be perfect, but the structure of the unit may not be. So to the ability of an individual to handle all those things is very difficult. But he only knows, or she only knows, what to handle after the event. Do you think you know what I mean? The event has to occur first, and the person makes a safety device. And he solved that problem. But there may be other problems, and another event may occur that's negative. And the person says, what can I do about it? I don't know enough about it. I'm going to read up on it and try to become familiar with the nature of the problem and try to solve it. And when a person says to you, have you solved it? This is a device I made in an attempt to solve it. Will it work? Well, according to the tests I did, it will. But in reality, it was cold and the oil didn't flow, so the thing wasn't lubricated and it didn't work. There are other factors you learn about later on. That's called after the facts. So some people get mad at technicians. They say, you're a technician, why did that thing fail? What do you suggest? Is what you put to that person. And they say, you designed that unit and it failed. Yes, it did fail. Apparently, I didn't know enough about solving that problem. What do you suggest? Don't get mad at me. What do you suggest? You've done nothing but expect me to solve the problem. Now, you want to discuss some other aspects of behavior?
That statement can be said towards human relationships.
Anything.
You try
Anything.
different things. If it doesn't work, then
And you don't know enough about solving the problem, or you can't solve the problem, or the person is too rigid in their values. They may learn after 5 years, but you're not that interested in spending 5 years with a person to try to convince them. There are people that don't even know what data means. If you submit data, they say, that's your opinion. They don't understand verification, what it means. And there are a lot of people that just don't understand. And you can get them to understand, but whether or not you've got the time to put out to that, if you had to spend 20 years on your mother to get her to understand certain things, by that time she's ready to fly away. You know what I mean? So you have to ask yourself, you know, they say he passed away, like he went some other place. He rotted away. That's what death is. We don't like that, so they say, he's gone. He's gone someplace else. That sounds better than he died. Boom. You say, he's passed away. He's with the Father. Oh, that's very pleasant. I like it better than say he's rotting away. That's not pleasant at all. That's why most people dress up the dead with a new suit and a tie and a silk coffin with soft pillows, softer than anything they ever slept on when they were alive. That casket is very, very, very comfortable. Has pearl handles. The guy wouldn't give a shit if you had no handles on it, if he was dead. You know what I mean? But to accept life that way, it's difficult for people. The losses are so tremendous. You say, he's gone now, he's off to another plane of existence, or he's with the Father. That's much more comforting than he's dead at the end. You know, that's a rough way to look at life. So you got to understand why people with a low self-sufficiency need artificiality. But if they really believed that the person was with the Father, they wouldn't cry. If they really believed in God, and they really believed if the person dies, he's now with the Father, they feel so wonderful now. Do you understand? But if they weep, it means they have doubts. Or they feel sorry that that person is no longer with them. But what did they do to secure the position? Did they put up a fireproof building? Guy said, all my kids were burnt in a fire. I came home one day and they were all burnt in fire. What do you suggest be done about it? I don't know. And that's part of the problem. You want to make buildings of fireproof material. You want to have a fire escape in the opposite direction. If that door is burning in that area, kids can't get out. That window is designed to come out in the opposite direction. That's the best you can do. If you did all that, the kids had never got out because you forgot to inform them that there was an escape hatch. So the next time you have kids, you might inform them, but there's no fire to back it up. Do you know what I'm talking about? Life isn't easy. There's just a lot of things we don't know. Hoping that things will work out is a cop-out. Nothing works out unless you help it work out. Now, I can get mad at you for something you did that I didn't expect you would do. You tore up my drawing because you thought that was too sophisticated. But you didn't consult me. So, am I right? Are you right? You may be right, and I may not have thought of it that way. But I prefer that you consult me and give me your point of view so that I might reject it or accept it. If I reject it and you burn it up for my own good, it's only my own good if I approve of what you did. If you do something to save me and I don't realize it, then I might dislike you, even though you're doing good for me. So you ask a person, does that please you? And you tell them about it. And if they say, no, don't do it, if that's their wish, and things don't work out, they might turn around and say, you know, you had the right idea. But they only can say that later. But if you expect them to be more reasonable, that's your own projections. Projections mean that we project into other people the behavior we'd like to see. I know you'll do the right thing, so I'll leave it with you. You don't know they'll do the right thing. You hope they would do the right thing. Is there other areas you want me to cover?
What would be some tools, Jacques, to maybe not speculate so much, say on old experiences or in relationships? How can we get away from that old associative memory to give somebody in a relationship?
I think I know what you want to know. I hope that was picked up by the recorder. But I would say this. When you first meet a person, do you believe in God? Yes. That means a lot of problems. Do you believe that God looks after you? Yes. That means more problems. Do you believe that the world is a reasonable place? Absolutely. More problems by their conclusions. So if you do a survey, say, what do you think? But don't interfere. Like I had a guy come to me and he said, I like to kill animals. I enjoy their struggle. If I said, you do what? He says, I like to kill animals. He said, well, I don't kill them every day, once every 2 months. Because you said, what did you do? He said, don't show any attitude. I said, I believe in God. I'm a metaphysician. I believe in the holy man. If you show, you believe in what? You know, well, once a year I see the holy man. He's going to edit what he says on your reactions. So if a person says, I like to kill animals, I say, what else do you do? Without showing any attitude, good or bad. Normal people say, you killed an animal? Did the animal hurt you? No. I just love to watch it suffering when I stab it with a needle. You say, that's a terrible thing to do. Well, that's your projection. That person is conditioned to do that. And if they're conditioned to do that, do you have the means to undo that conditioning? No, I don't. And turn it over to someone that may. Now, they don't need a moral lecture. That won't turn them around. What will turn them around is showing the fact that that excites them. You know, if you don't understand that, that's why people driving a car will slow up out of an accident. Say, what happened? The guy stuck his head out of the window, there's a telephone pole there, and it knocked his head off. Jesus Christ. So they slow up when there's an accident to see what happened. The guy steps out perfectly well with a flower. That's not what they expected. So when some psychiatrists think that if two planes hit midair and it crashes to the ground, that people get a kick at it because they weren't in that plane. They compare the poor condition, and it gives them a sense of being more alive when they see someone else killed. Can you understand that? Well, if you see someone else killed, if you don't know who they are, there's no basis, except you say, how terrible. Who was killed in the car accident? 2 young children and women might lie. Well, the 2 young children were dying of cancer and had a week to live. You say maybe it's better that they went that way. You know what I'm talking about? It's very hard to come up with the correct view because you don't know enough about it. Do a survey first of the person. What do you believe in? I'm a Seventh-day Adventist. Do you believe God looks after you? Yes, I do. Do you believe in punishment? I believe in the strap. And that brings children around when you use your belt and you teach them not to do that again. Well, if they give you a bunch of erroneous conclusions, you can expect problems if you rely on that person. The less you rely on another person whom you don't know, the less problems. I don't know if that answered your question.
This is 20 minutes of a 48-minute section. We're going to play the second half of that next week. So this is the first section now. So we can take questions.
First question, how does the Venus Project view such things as psychosomatic illnesses, disorders, and placebo meditations? Are these things studied through a scientific approach or considered more along the lines of quackery? And thanks for the answering of hugs and yeah, Vixie. This is only speaking from my experiences as much as I know. I would say it like this. If we're talking about the transitional period or we're talking about the Venus Project, the realization of a resource-based economy, I would suppose that any kind of method that might be helpful for people will be studied. So we have a great length of, we have actually so much knowledge, not really concrete knowledge, but let's say experiences from, let's say, the Eastern cultures. Okay, then I have a problem with my presentation view, I guess.
Can we ask Jacques and Roxanne to answer that question?
That would be nice, yes.
Jacques, can you talk about conditioning animals? When you're in a state-sponsored psychological trailer park, also, how did you catch the snakes? Can you talk about when you conditioned animals during the Depression? Yeah, it was a transit camp.
What type? It depends on the kind of conditioning you want. I didn't have the time to take care of all the raccoons that I captured, so I made a turnstile in a continuous cage. In order to get food, they had to go through a lot of turnstiles to get to the end cage. The turnstiles swept the floor of their cage, and all the crumbs went down where the red ants ate them. So I didn't have the time to take care of all the animals. I conditioned some of the dogs to help feed the raccoons, so they would help me. So I could take on more animals by using clever techniques or devices to assist me. If you teach an animal to press a lever to get water, and you press another lever, a dark lever or a different shaped lever to get food, and press another lever to exit the cage that they're in, they will learn how to do that, and it all depends on what you want of the animal, the way you condition them. You ask me, well, how did you condition them? It depends on what I wanted.
Also, this question says, how did you catch the snakes?
I would lift up objects on the ground like heavy stones, and I would lift them up, and there's usually a snake under a stone, a rock, or a flat surface. And then I use a forked stick. A forked stick looks like the letter Y, and I put it over the head so I wouldn't be bitten if it were a poisonous snake. Then I would grab it behind the forked stick, so I would control the direction of the head. And then I would drop it into a container or a box with a small opening. I caught snakes mostly with forked stick.
Have you ever attempted to turn around anyone working within politics? Who and what happened? Humphrey, did you work with him much?
No, I didn't work with Humphrey much, because he was not familiar with experimental work of that kind, and it would take too long to get the point across. Politicians generally know very little about human behavior or social history. They know what the history books tell them, but they don't really understand the effects of environment upon behavior.
We did have one politician here once that came to the tour. He was a Republican, and I was astonished as to how little he knew and how immature he seemed to be.
Well, you'll have to find out yourself. Try talking to politicians. If they go for politics, that ought to tell you a lot about them. The very fact that they want to be a president or a congressman tells you that they have a low self-sufficiency and want public recognition for the position they hold, not for what they do.
Jacques, have you considered putting together a specific plan for child development, for example, a blueprint on how to raise a child in a socially sustainable way? This could be a way of promoting the Venus Project if you wrote a book about this.
Well, I've never written a book about that in particular because there's so much a person has to learn before they even work with children. So I would say that I can only make a tape and giving you different approaches to working with children. I can make a DVD which will give you a better idea of how to raise children.
What do you think it was from your own early development or conditioning that set you on the tracks of critical thinking, interest in science?
I don't think it was any one thing. I think it was many different occurrences. For example, my parents, if I would not obey them, they might hurt me or take away a certain privilege. Apparently that didn't work. And I tried it out on different animals, and working with animals, I tried the punishment, the reward system, and found out that you don't need to hurt an animal to teach it things. You can also teach it things by varying the environment that they're in. If you don't understand that, if I wanted a dog to survive within a given area, I would put a bunch of levers in the confined area that the dog is in. And if the dog pressed a certain lever, he would get water. If he pressed another lever, he would get food. If he pressed another lever, he would get my attention. So you have to do that yourself. You have to find out what this particular animal responds to. I had difficulty with snakes. I mentioned that. In conditioning snakes, I didn't know how to get to them at all. And I found out later, of course, after a lot of experiments, that didn't work. I found if I put a glass partition between the snake and a white mouse, every time he snapped toward the mouse, he hit the glass. And after about 10 or 15 snaps at the white mouse, he stopped snapping toward the white mouse. Then I took the glass out, and the white mouse was free to go anywhere in the cage, even leap on the, or position itself on the snake's head, and it wouldn't bother the mouse.
What are some of the things that, in your early experience, that conditioned you towards science? Any specific things?
Aviation, because airplanes work in 3 dimensions. An automobile is on the ground and works in 2 dimensions. Airplanes work in 3 dimensions. And there are many more problems you need to control them. So aviation was a very good exposure to the nature of the physical sciences related to aircraft.
What was your general goal for conditioning your own children? Did you want them to develop in any particular way?
Yes, I want them to have a deep appreciation for science, not to argue with each other, and to learn how to handle differences in point of view without getting angry. Understanding another person will draw different conclusions due to their different background. I also learned to ask people what certain words meant to them, to understand how they interpreted the world they live in. And that told me what they needed in order to become more accurate in their predictability. See, all human beings really seek predictability. So when a man spanks his child, he hopes that the child will be obedient to his commands. But if they're not obedient, he spanks them more, which is not the answer. He doesn't even know what to look for. So with some exposure to psychology, some exposure, it gives you better tools than the tools you have without training.
So far, these all seem to be directed towards Jacques, so it's difficult to take somebody else in, but hopefully soon there'll be others. The other person can answer. But let me go on, Jacques, because there are a couple more for you. Have you ever used or looked to biomimicry in your inventions? I remember you talked about you first developed Velcro, and you wanted to use it in Navy. You introduced it for the pants, and you got that through the plants that stuck together. Do you want to describe that?
Yes, there are many different types of plants. When you walk through the woods, it sticks to your trousers. And that suggested the idea for Velcro. And nature's been around for millions of years. And nature, I hate to say nature solved the problem, but nature has worked out many life forms that tend to exist. And if you study what nature had accomplished over years, you can save yourself a lot of trouble.
I remember the story that you tried to introduce Velcro to the Navy. A long time ago, didn't they have a lot of buttons?
Yes, a lot of buttons on the trousers of a sailor. And he had to button himself up before he came out of the barracks. With Velcro, they can come out right away if there's an air raid or anything else. So I thought of using the natural method that Velcro sticks to clothing to make two pieces of Velcro on the zipper area, so you didn't need to zip things up or button the fly.
This was long before Velcro came into existence.
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
And he also introduced that to the Air Force. You were in the Air Force, right? For the shoes, too, so the sailors could get very quickly.
To button up those high shoes. It took too long to get out of the barracks.
And I remember the story, you brought it to somebody in the Air Force, and you described it, and they said you forgot one thing, and you were amazed. You said, what is it? What did I forget? You were really interested. And they said, tradition.
Yeah. Well, you would never use airplanes in the Army if you went by tradition. Yeah. A very good example of that was the Polish. They believed in the cavalry, and the Germans slaughtered them on their horses because they couldn't see the future.
Where did you pick up your artistic and modeling skills? Where did you pick them up from?
Necessity. I made things out of wood, and I had to learn how to carve propellers and other things because in the early days you couldn't buy a ready-made propeller for a miniature airplane. We had to make them, so we had to develop skills. And to develop skills, you got a book on how to carve propellers. In other words, if you looked at experience of other people, you would save yourself a lot of trouble rather than slowly evolving. Then you'd learn how to balance a propeller. If you didn't balance it, the airplane would shake. And so you have to learn that. And the more you learn, the more you had to bring to ideas. The more you read about nature, about technology, the more inventive you became. You cannot invent things unless you've been exposed to a lot of different concepts. The more concepts you're exposed to, the more experience you have, the more you can bring to a subject.
Okay, another question. Jacques, if an organization developed a new social system which surpassed your city designs in many areas and had better approaches in changing social values, would the Venus Project drop its activities and assist with that organization's development?
Yes.
Really nice. Is there a difference between a resource-based economy and a gift economy?
Yes, thank you. I would like to try to answer this question. I would like to apologize for my broken English first. As far as I understand, the gift economy, it's deal more with the social status and the gifts available by available at the moment, which was produced at the moment. It was available as a resource in a given area. And these examples was in the different cultures, low-tech cultures. What resource-based economy does, this is very high-tech, organized society, and you're not just receiving gifts as a social status or to maybe find a common ground or something like that, to maybe the communication way or something. The resource-based economy provide gives the services which is needed with the estimation for population growth, for development of population, and etc. And if we looking into gift economy, the gift economy just deal with what is available at the moment. The gift economy not developing their society to work together in the future.
Do you want to go on with the next question? Who is it that's answering? I'm sorry, I didn't get your name.
This is Stan. Yeah, I answered this question, and in the field I will answer another one.
Sure, go ahead with the next one.
All right. How much of the centralized data will be made available? Now, may I just basically ask everybody who is listening, when you ask questions, I would really appreciate, I'm sure that everybody will really appreciate it if you're a little bit more specific on that. Basically, centralized data when? During the transition, when the Venus project is realized, in what way centralized? Basically, just like an example. But as far as I can imagine, the centralized data that will be gathered from all, let's say, all the probes, all the computers that are put in the ground or in the air or in the seas. This data, let's say the raw data, will be put into a system where the system will analyze the data and produce, let's say, specific results. Based on these results, there will be specific actions taken. But it all depends on what kind of data do you want to know that will be made available. If you want raw data, you will get information that is not really information to you. Let's say random numbers that you wouldn't really understand. As well as that, let's say if we're talking about geology or weather forecasting, even if you don't get the raw data, you get the, let's say, the process data, how much will that be of interest to you, or how much will you understand? If you're in a specific field and you understand these things, of course you have access, but that's only in a resource-based economy. Anybody wants to add to that?
Yeah, I will try to add to that. But maybe we're talking about different time frame. If we're talking about resource-based economy, I understand that all the data will be available which is relevant to your interest. If you would like to know more about specific field or get more updates in your location, on your device or whatever, so you will get information you need. The next one is, how does TVP view such things as psychosomatic and illness disorders and placebo medication? Roxanne, can you please answer that, because I don't feel comfortable.
Is that during the transition, or is that after?
That's what we were just saying. Are these things studied through a scientific approach or considered more along the lines of quackery?
Well, I would say that I'm not very much for placebos or pills. I would rather engineer the behavior out of another person that's socially offensive. Educate them out of that kind of behavior. Give them behavior that is more advantageous in achieving the ends they wish to achieve by teaching them how to go about it. In other words, most psychosomatic problems are based upon too much concern with the self. If you get out of yourself, like suicide, what do I amount to? My life isn't going anywhere. It's all self-pity. If you get out of yourself and get to work on things, on other people, helping other people, then you usually don't have those types of aberrations.
And you're given so many erroneous values today that it's so hard to deal with anything for so many people when they rely on religion or a father figure to take care of problems. They just don't have any other alternatives to think about their problems. So it's very hard to know if the person has some brain injury or if it's a value system injury. It seems to manifest the same ways.
Mostly value system injury.
Yeah. Jacques Roxanne, what would be the required conditions when trying to negotiate with a local university about building a research city based on the Venus Project's designs? Should the city be named the Venus Research Cities? Should the Venus Project-oriented people organize it?
Only if they consult the Venus Project. If they consult the Venus Project, they don't have to ask those questions.
They're asking about building a city along with the university. I don't know, if you get any university interested, that would be great. Then have them get in touch with us.
Yes.
That would be good. Would jobs held by scientists and engineers be automated? Why or why not? Oh, does somebody else want to take this question?
What's that?
Yeah, I would like to try that. I had this question many times and I asked Jacques about it, and because lots of jobs, but in my view, it was very difficult to understand how, for example, the surgeon work or any doctor work can be automated because they should have judgment in particular situation. But the response was all the judgment, all their skills, all the methods was learned in universities. We learn a lot of information which can be replicated in the machine. So will job be automated in the future? Yes, most of the jobs will be automated in the future, and it depends. Of course, if we're talking about transition, if we're talking about resource-based economy, it's a different time frame. But eventually, as I understand, most boring and monotonous jobs will be automated. We will not automate the jobs. We'll actually advance human beings and advance human skills if people will do these jobs.
May I add something?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, I would say that it also depends on the level of computer technology that is achieved at this moment, as to which level we can automate the jobs in this area then. So, for example, I think it would take some years from now, based on the limited knowledge that I have, to completely automate like a surgeon, a really sophisticated way, while for other jobs it only takes a few months maybe to create a machine that does this job. So even the computer technology will develop in ways that we, from our limited viewpoint today, cannot really understand at the moment. And we can only estimate on which level we will get with this. So there are very far-going estimations on this. In these scenarios, there are also very high-level jobs in education today, or that you need much education today for that can be automated and made by machines. So it always depends on what we want to do with the machines. We are the ones who create them, and yeah. So it depends on the technology we have and what we want to do with them, and the value system that then imposes upon us what we want to do with them.
If I had to answer that type of question, I would say that machines can do almost anything a human can do except feel. Machines will never feel. They won't feel emotions, hate, love, gee, I did a good job, I'm going to try to do a better job next time. They will not have such a value system. Machines will not feel. Machines have no ambition, no sympathy, no love, no caring attitude. But you don't want machines to have that anyway. You just want machines to do a given job. Fill bottles with aromatics or shaving cream on a production line. You want automobiles to build transportation units. They don't have to feel good about it. You don't need feelings in a machine. You need the ability to design machines to accomplish a given task. That's the problem. But to make machines feel things would serve no useful purpose.
I guess this is for Jacques. Define what you mean by the term identify, and could you elaborate on it? And he's talking about the early lectures from the 1974 to 80 lectures. I mean, we'd have
be
to,
specific.
yeah, we'd have to know more about,
A specific
yeah,
subject.
maybe how you used it within a sentence or a few different ways, because I can't remember that either.
Sorry, Roxanne, I was talking about identity, the identity and approval lecture.
We'd have to play that one again to know.
No worries.
Or do you have another question concerning it, something more specific regarding that?
The idea basically was that the identity of the person, basically yesterday we listened to the lecture, the group, and it was very interesting, and we wanted to know basically what Jacques meant by this term, because the identity of a person, as far as we understood, is the complex, let's say, processes the person went through and identified himself or herself to throughout their life.
Well, if you talk to a Seminole Indian about a retractable landing gear on an airplane, they wouldn't know what you're talking about. So you have to ask yourself, who are you talking to? What is their background? What kind of society do they come from? Are they technical, non-technical? So you can frame your words so they might understand you.
Let me see if you're talking about a self-identity, the identity that somebody has of themselves. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Well, self-identity is what you identify with. If you're brought up as an Eskimo and you do nothing but hunt seals, your subject matter is limited to the lifestyle you live, and you identify with the lifestyle you live. If you're brought up in a high-tech society and you feel with mathematics, you can't talk to an Eskimo about your mathematical interests or why you're interested in mathematics. You have to either give them some form of reference so they can understand what you're talking about. Not everybody understands what you're talking about. Mostly we talk at people rather than to them. We say good morning. You know, we don't control the weather, but we say good morning, how's everybody? Very well, thank you. But we really don't go into anything. These are automatic reactions.
Somebody's asking, how do we get a hold of the paper or digital copy of End the World Will Be One that you did with Steve Dahl? You say most of the previous material was rolled into The Best That Money Can't Buy. However, this book seems more autobiographical. We're really not putting that out right now. We may do it a little bit later. We're using some of it for the film, or the film might turn into a TV series. We're negotiating with some groups, but we'll let you know when anything really comes about with that. We're seeing them soon, but either would be good with us. So let me go on to the next sentence. Jacques, you once said you met Buckminster Fuller before he became popular. What questions did you ask him and how did he respond? What were your thoughts on him?
Well, he was a very inventive person, what you call a very original thinker. And I asked him whether he had any social ideas. He said, "You're trying to change the world, Jacques, and I can't even get my car out on the market." So he wasn't very social at the time I met him. He didn't concern himself with it, nor was he interested in it. When I talked to him about the subject matter, he expressed no particular interest in social design at that time. That was a long time ago, before he was famous, possibly after he wrote a book called 9 Chains to the Moon.
Before that, the first time you met him a few times, but the first time you met him, that was when he first had his car out? I mean, the date
he was working on the car.
Okay.
He didn't have it out.
Okay.
It was called an iMaxim.
Could maybe pinpoint date with that. Are hilly cities counterproductive and earthworks always needed? And earthworks always needed, even considering flood issues? I'm not sure what the question is. Always living on hilly cities and figured excellent.
Okay, as far as I understand the question, the person says that he lives in the hilly cities and he think that, or she, I'm sorry, their design on the flatlands it's better than on hill cities for the Venus Project cities. But again, it depends of what you're trying to achieve and what kind of city you're planning to build.
Initially, we would want the first city to be on flat land. It's a lot less labor intensive, resource intensive. Things could work out much easier in terms of reproducing 1/8 of the city.
And transportation will be simpler. But if you have, mountains are useful in that in the cold weather, snow forms on the mountain, and in the spring the snow melts and irrigates the land when there's no rain or hardly much rain. So mountains can be very useful in the cycle of water and how we use it. So it's not good to design cities on mountains because it would be less efficient. It would take more energy to build cities on hilly land rather than flat terrain.
Anybody want to take what's the difference between anarchy and the Venus Project?
Yeah, I'll do that. When it comes to anarchy, the term actually comes from the ancient Greek anarchia, which means the absence of a leader. When it comes to the Venus Project, let's continue with anarchy. So it's just a term. There's something mentioned about that Gandhi actually used this word, but there's no actual, let's say, mechanics behind it. So the word by itself doesn't really mean how we're going to achieve that environment or that society that we don't need any leaders. So if there's anybody who is more familiar with that and can provide more evidence of any mechanism in the anarchy structure of how we can achieve it, of how there is no need for a leader, okay, that's not a problem. When it comes to the Venus Project, the most important part of it, when it comes to the no necessity of a leader, is the fact that when it comes, basically leaders are needed now in the system in order to take decisions, in order to make decisions for the large group. But when it comes to the Venus Project, we assume that in the future we would really understand that all decisions are technical, so we can arrive at them. Let's say in our language, we can make the most optimal one with the help of science and technology. So the Venus Project, basically the difference, the basic difference is that anarchy says that there is an absence of a leader. But the Venus Project actually creates the environment not to have any necessity of a leader.
Yes, that is true.
Yeah, very good. Anybody want to take on the next question?
Okay, I will try to do that one. What are relevant to you the most effective ways of changing the absolute beliefs of person in a discussion? Well, it's a lot of different ways, but the best, as I understood, the best way is, for example, in demonstration. If you can take the person idea and give an example which is relevant example for them, so they can see the obsolescence of the idea. I just recently learned one. I can suggest the person ask, this is about their belief system. The person asks to question the evolution. The person asks if people involved from monkeys, why is still monkeys? Which actually is very often question. And the reply for that was, what do you think about domestic dogs and wolves? Do you think the domestic dogs evolved from wolves? Yes. So this is the same thing. So if you can give example like that, I think it will be helpful. And I was and always good to probably refer to Jacques' demonstration of the round Earth, which he talked about the New York Arab community. So that's my understanding.
Yeah, that's great. I guess this was for Jacques. What has been your most favorite invention?
Social design.
Most ambitious. Jacques, Roxanne, has Joel Noel There's no Noel here, there's Joel and Larry and others working with you, got enough knowledge to explain things like you both do well. How have they developed while they are working for the project? What is their role?
I don't force anybody into anything. It depends on the questions they ask and how well they understand them.
Actually, Joel deals with our YouTube channel, and he's the one that gives the answers for that. So,
Provides.
yeah. So he does pretty well. Jacques, why did you pick Florida to move to from LA?
Well, I left LA when the smog began, and it became very painful. And I left because it was very difficult. It was smog all over the place. And no program was designed to end that system. There were a lot of proposals, but apparently the politicians paid no attention to the proposals because the industry did not want to foot the bill to put in electronic precipitators to get rid of the smog. I left. Florida was clean at the time.
Did you come to Florida after you got evicted from one of your research centers that you built because they were going to build a highway through there? Did that correlate at that time?
Yes. Yes, it did.
Okay. I didn't know that. How are the new tapes coming along that you have recently provided by Carl? Well, we've got them all in the computer now, so we have to work on them for sound. It's actually a job that Joel's taken on, and we just get so much interruption with so many things happening here that things take longer than we always want, but they're coming along. We are continuously working on that. And this is for me. Can you tell me about your own life and general life experiences before you ever came to know Jacques? Well, my parents moved around a lot. People ask me where I came from, and I really don't know what to say. Up and down the East Coast of the United States, many different states. Then I was always interested in art and worked on it a lot, spent a lot of time on it. I went to college for art, but I graduated, I went to two different colleges and majored in fine arts, but when I graduated, I really knew very little about drawing. And somebody introduced me to Jacques' lectures, and I listened to them, and I ended up going to, when I was about 26, going to his lectures, and I just stayed and started working with Jacques and started reading some of the books on book list. Generally was interested in what he was saying and how he drew. When I saw how he drew, that was one of my main interests. I wanted to draw like that. I worked really hard, took lessons from Jacques, and he taught me how to draw technically and how it applies to fine arts. And, I understood that if I wanted to see the world that Jacques talked about, I had to work at it and I had to build it. So I stayed on to do that. It meant more to me than anything I'd ever heard and anything I had experienced. So I couldn't have gotten this experience anywhere else. So I used to attend Jacques' lectures at his home. He used to give it 3 times a week. That's where the old tapes come from the 70s and 80s. That's about it. And I've learned a tremendous amount from working with him and had to pick up and do a lot of things. Because we didn't have the finances to hire other people and we wanted things done a certain way, such as the editing or the way the buildings were built. I did a lot of that cement work and actually built the buildings and got a lot of experience with that. I always thought it was really important for educating kids the way I got educated through Jacques. He first taught me how to do technical illustration, which I never got in perspective in college and art school. And then how to make the models, and I learned on his designs, which made it more interesting than anything I could have gotten in school, and then how to build the buildings. So, and then living in them and understanding how you do it differently, I thought was a tremendous experience and thought all kids should go through that. Okay, so next question. Why don't you guys run a Twitter site delivering relevant messages and words of wisdom on a daily basis? That's a good idea. We started a Twitter site. Actually, Joel started it, but we take on so much here that we never kept it up. So if anybody else wants to do that based on some of the writings, I know Dennis has taken on different quotes, which are really nice, making it into kind of artwork on Facebook. I think it's a great idea. If anybody wants to help with this, get in touch with us. With the materials that we put out, and that's a lot of materials. You can draw from the old lecture tapes or from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Yeah, all the way up to our new material. Have you watched Owned and Operated? No. Is that a movie? We haven't. Maybe somebody can send us a link.
Yeah, I just would like to say, some people start project Twitter movement, the Venus Project Twitter movement on the Facebook. So I will let them know, so they will make it more visible. But this is very good project. So they try to tweet on a daily basis for the Venus Project.
That would be wonderful. We appreciate that. How many hours do you sleep, Jacques? Is there a particular sleeping method, timing that you use?
No.
No, we always feel sleep deprived. Because, yeah. I guess that's about it. Thanks, everyone, for your help in answering the questions.
Yes, we always appreciate that.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, having other people answer the questions as well. That's terrific.
Yes, I'm very pleased with your answers.
Yeah, they were really good. We'll talk with you next week. I do have a concern I'm really sorry how the audio on the lectures skip a bit. In the original form, they don't skip. So hopefully we'll get it up on the website so it doesn't skip. We'll have to talk to Joe and to Sean about that. Maybe that's just the nature of people coming in and out of TeamSpeak. I don't know. But we'll have the second half of that lecture that we played today. And actually, there's 2 hours of that lecture. So we will continue that. So thanks again, everyone.